It is done! Through my own inhuman levels of hand-eye coordination and perseverance, I have completed this 30-day challenge in 9 months. In this video, we'll be redrawing this bad boy right here to see if I've actually learned how to draw anime. But first, there was one more thing I had to learn before officially being done with all the lessons in the course. Line art. The lessons on line art mainly focused on a few techniques you can use to make your line art look better. For example, if you have one object in front of another object like this, you can thicken these overlapping lines on the foreground object like this, and it helps emphasize that this circle is in front of this cylinder. This is called line weighting. So in an actual drawing, you would likely see this around the chin area here, or around the hair, and many other places. There's also hook shading, which is a small triangular shadow that also helps emphasize differences in depth. Honestly, if I hadn't taken these lessons, I probably never would have noticed any of these details because of how subtle they are, especially this sneaky little triangle shadow. And that was mostly it for the line art section, and with that said, all the lessons are finally complete. But wait, now normally I'd be happy, but after completing the final lesson, I was still a little confused on how to correctly smash together everything I learned in order to make a complete piece of art. How do I go from the rough stage of a drawing to not so rough to perfection? Luckily for me though, the instructor included full character demos that showed him drawing an entire character. I tried to follow along step by step with the instructor's drawing process, paying close attention to how he progressed from a rough sketch to refining those roughs and then to line art. It made me realize just how important it is to get those fundamental proportions correct when you're starting to draw your character. Now, you're probably thinking, now that he knows how important the fundamentals are, he'll probably go back and review all the earlier lessons. Nope, it's time to draw some Vegeta. This decision will come back to bite me later. Alright, so to start this drawing off, I began with making 8 circles to help me follow the 8 heads rule. I also kept my first drawing of Vegeta up in the corner, just in case I needed to remind myself of how I drew things last time. And to remind myself not to miss drawing certain details like the bottom part of the armor. At first, I was just sketching things out without really thinking about it too much. It didn't take long for me to realize, however, that, man, drawing a symmetrical character is hard. The more I drew, the more unsymmetrical my drawing became. So I started to use the line tool more and more to make guidelines that helped me try to get things symmetrical on both sides. Unfortunately, I had already drawn a good amount before realizing this, so I had to fix some things. I ended up resizing the limbs a bunch, and even made his head a little bit bigger. So here's where I decided to start cleaning things up a bit. The eyes gave me a lot of trouble. I remembered that Vegeta's eyes are kinda triangular, but I could never quite get them like how I remembered them in my head. So I ended up drawing some eyes off to the side until I was satisfied with something. The second eye that I drew there looked decent enough, so I just went with that one. The shoulder pads of the armor was something I really wanted to get right this time around. In the last drawing, it kinda looked like Vegeta was wearing tiny baguettes on his shoulders instead of armor. As cool as it would be to head into battle wearing French bread shoulder pads, it's gotta go. Right here I realized I almost forgot to draw on the bottom part of the armor, so I filled that in real quick. So in a little bit you're gonna see me have some trouble drawing the arms. I still wasn't quite sure how to draw a muscular arm, so you know, naturally I thought about using my own massively muscular arms as a reference. I don't mean to brag, but I have a whole 10 minutes on Ring Fit Adventure. So I guess you could say I'm pretty buff. Alright, all jokes aside, I knew it wasn't gonna work, so I just did the best I could and moved on. In the end though, I think they turned out alright. I took a second look at my whole drawing and decided I must have messed up the proportions somewhere because he was looking way too top heavy. Well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions. Guess I should have reviewed the proportions lessons after all. Luckily for me, this is digital art, so I just resized his upper body. Okay, it's time to move on to the line art. Remember those eyes I drew off to the side? Well, it was finally time to put them to good use. I did my best trying to get them symmetrical. They ended up not being quite the same on both sides, but I think it's good enough. And then after slightly changing up how I drew the nose and the mouth, it was finally time for my favorite part of the drawing, the hair. I started it off by making sure I got his McDonald's M hairline just right. I also ended up making his hair similar to the second demo character, and gave it some sharp angles, just because I thought it looked cool. In my rough sketch, it felt like his hair wasn't crazy enough for a Dragon Ball Z character. So I added another background layer of hair, just to add more volume to it. While I was drawing, I thought about how glad I was that I followed along with the character demos. I picked up on a lot of useful shortcuts the instructor was using that I will 100% keep using forever. Such as flipping and rotating the canvas around. It seems like such a simple technique to use, but it made certain lines and angles much easier and more natural feeling to draw. It was at this point where I started to feel some fatigue. All of my brain cell was working overtime here, and it was not happy. It's actually used to not doing any work at all, so I ended up getting up several times to take a break. If you're someone that can finish an entire character in one go, then props to you and your Super Saiyan levels of stamina. While I was outlining the bottom part of the armor, I thought that having so many horizontal lines running down the side of them looked a little bit strange. So I ended up changing that up by the end of the drawing. Drawing the lines for the arms and the legs went surprisingly well, but unfortunately I can't say the same for the gloves. I wanted to change how I drew them into a more natural looking position. I tried to use my own balled up fist as a reference to draw the hands, but despite that, I still couldn't get them looking quite right. Man, I'm using my own hands as a reference here, but the gloves still look weird. Maybe it's my hands that are weird. Maybe it was my own hands that were the problem after all. Who knows? From here on, there's not much to comment on since it's just me finishing up the rest of the drawing. The last thing left to do was to draw the shoes and then add in some line weighting and hook shading. Not gonna lie, I just flat out gave up drawing the shoes because I have no idea how to draw them. This was my first time adding in line weighting and hook shading to my own drawing, so I just added them in wherever they seemed like they should go. I also added in a little bit of shading to the inside of the boots and the gloves. And with all the tiny details done, this drawing was finally complete. Let's take a look at our final results. Well, would you look at that? Looks like I've managed to draw a real human being this time. There's still a ton of stuff I can improve upon, but at the very least it's a definite improvement over my last drawing. Considering I basically started out with 0 drawing skills, I'm pretty satisfied with how this turned out. Okay, so obviously this little art experiment ran way longer than I intended it to. But I am 100% sure that an actual hardworking person could probably finish this drawing course in like 2 weeks if they really tried. When I was actually working on this series, instead of spending all my time playing Minecraft, I was having a blast. Learning how to draw and making videos is just straight up fun. So I think I'm gonna continue doing both. This class was mostly about the basics, so there's a lot more stuff I want to learn before I'll be satisfied. So if you enjoyed following along in this journey with me, then feel free to smash that like and subscribe button for more. That way in another 3 to 4 months when I finally upload another video, you can be pleasantly surprised that I'm still alive. But until then, mission complete, and I'll see you in the next one.